are so thankful for Rhea and her team for doing this for us. And they actually work with Libby, and we are going to be getting ASHA CEUs for these sessions. Sorry about that. We are going to be getting ASHA CEUs for these sessions beginning, I think, in October. Oh, Rhea, I like your hairstyle. That looks good. I haven't seen you for a while. So you'll be start getting those CEUs in October, I believe. With that, we'll just turn it over to Rhea.
It's actually November.
Okay, I apologize. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I know there was something that came out that they had to split it into 2 years. So I guess I didn't realize that that's what's going to start in November. Now I understand what you were saying about us paying for just 1 month, but we'll do that because we did promise. So you'll start getting ASHA CEUs in November. Thanks for that, Libby. Okay, we will go ahead and turn it over to Rhea, and thank you and your team for what you're going to do for us today. We're excited to see you guys.
Sure. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of TelePracticing. So today we're going to take some suggestions that we received and some requests, and that's how we're going to be presenting for TelePracticing today. So the session is going to be divided up into 2 parts. The first part, we're going to be talking specifically about the resource boom cards, and Rachel Fowler is going to talk about boom cards with us. And the second part is going to be focused on Story Champs and how we can use that tool virtually. And Tracy Toman is going to present on that. So Rachel's going to present first, and then we're going to take any questions on the boom cards side of the presentation. And then Tracy's going to present, and we're going to take questions on that. And then we'll have a few minutes for overall general questions at the end. So as usual, if this is your first time joining us, you can plug your questions into the chat feature, and we'll address them as soon as we get to a questions portion. So I am going to mute myself, and I'm going to let Rachel take over the show for now.
Okay, so hi, everybody. Like Rhea said, I'm Rachel Fowler. I've been with Integrated Speech Solutions for about a year now. And I just kind of want to preface this presentation by saying I'm not getting paid by Boom Learning, but it is something that I use in my therapy pretty much every day. So I want to be able to share that with you guys. Now, during this presentation, I'm going to be kind of toggling back and forth between the actual slides and boom cards to do demos. So that's why I don't have the slideshow in full screen here. So bear with me as we go through. And there's me. So let's get started by talking about what boom cards are. So according to the Boom Learning website, they're self-grading exercises that are gamified for students, and they provide the data that teachers want. So today what we're going to be talking about are using boom cards in therapy and some different ways to tailor the use of boom cards to the needs of both the students and yourself. So Sally was gracious enough, and Rhea as well, to include some charts that we have made that describe some of the different decks that we love to use. And these are just suggestions. They really range from, pre-K all the way up into 12th grade. And there's a brief description about each one of the decks that we like to use. So feel free to refer to those if that's something that you guys want to check out. These are the articulation decks that we have. And we have some language ones as well. So as you can see, you can really target a bunch of different things using boom cards. So we have language, we have basic concepts. And I think, as we explore, you guys will see that there is really something for everybody on the Boom website. So what do we need in order to use boom cards? Well, the first thing that we need is a computer with internet access. We're going to need a Boom account. Now, there are free or paid accounts, which we'll kind of touch on here in just a little bit. Ability to screen share, which was actually covered in the telepracticing session from back in August. So feel free to refer to that if you have any questions about sharing your screen. And there are bonus points if you can give remote control access to your student, it helps them to be able to interact better with the cards themselves. And I will say it does work better on a laptop than a tablet, but we'll get into that in more detail here in just a little bit as well. So when we're talking about teacher accounts, like I said, there are free or paid accounts. We have the ability to create a class and add students. So each individual student can be working on different things, and they'll have their own profile box, which I'll talk about in my demo here in just a second. And it's nice because you do have the ability to work directly with your students, or you can assign them decks to do in their free time. So getting started, I'm kind of going to go over this PowerPoint slide first, and then I have a little demo that I'm going to show you. We're going to explore using the toolbar at the top of the screen. Let me switch over so you can see here. So as you can see, this is my Boom profile. There is a toolbar up here at the top of the screen that kind of helps us navigate throughout the entire website. So if we want to download something new, we're going to go to our store. I'll go ahead and open that for you guys so you can see. And I personally like to use the search bar just because Boom has cards for so many different things. You know, teachers download these for math class. There are science cards. There are foreign language cards. So things that I've typed in are, you know, for example, K articulation cards. And then a bunch of different K articulation cards will pop up. Some are free, some are paid. Obviously, I like to start with all the free ones and get through what I can. But I have actually purchased some cards and they're great as well. So after you download your cards, they're going to be stored in your library. And I'll go ahead and switch over to my library now. So all of my cards, and I have tons and tons, are here in my library. Something that I like to do is organize them by concept. So I have some articulation cards, and then I have my language cards kind of divided up based on different concepts here. So I have vocabulary, syntax, basic concepts. You can really tailor it to your own needs and divide them up however you want to divide them up. Okay. So working with Boom cards, if you want to work with a deck of Boom cards, once you're signed up and signed in, and you want to work directly with a student, what we're going to do is we're going to go over to the Boom Learning website. I'm going to choose an articulation deck. So let's do apple tree articulation. We'll stick with our fall theme today. So if I'm working directly with a student, I'm going to go through this articulation deck with them. And what you can do is you can actually keep data yourself. As you can see, these are really interactive. So I'm clicking on these right now. If I were to want to give remote access and allow my student to be able to click and drag, I could do that as well. And I've included on this slide, there are links to how to give remote control access on Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and Google Meets. And I've also included a link to copy and paste on the links and resources page at the end of this presentation. So for example, what I've done before is we'll pick an apple. We'll practice saying all of our sounds. We'll make our way all the way through the apple tree. And then if I want to actually have more productions, I will make the student tell me which one to cover back up. So I'll cover them back up. And this is just for initial K. This particular deck goes through medial position and final position as well. So you can see over here on the final page, we have K in the final position, which is really nice. Okay. So If you want to get a little more individualized, like I said, if you're working directly with a student, you do have the ability to just take the data yourself and go through the deck, and that's perfectly fine. If you want to personalize things a little bit more, you can create a class. So when we create a class, it allows us to keep track of data. We can assign decks for a student to complete in their free time as homework, or we can actually have the student log in prior to the session and do the work under their profile, and it will keep our accuracy for us, which is nice. It helps us out with the data, and we'll get into the student sign-in information here in just a little bit. So if I want to create a class, let me switch back over here. I'm going to go to my profile under classes. And I've actually created a sample class for this presentation. If I want to add a class, I'm going to click on this new classroom button. Now, when I open this new classroom button, you have the ability to add one student or you can add several students. And the number of classes and students that you can add depends on the package of Boom Learning that you have. So if you have a free account, I think you can do one class with 5 students. And you can add more classes and more students as you kind of climb that hierarchy of membership levels. So let's look at my sample class here. So as you can see, I could add one student or I could add many students here. For today, we're going to be using Tracy as our example student. So you can really do all kinds of cool stuff with these individual, I call them profile boxes for each student. If I were to want to assign Tracy a deck, I would click on this little drop-down menu and it'll pop up. And I'm going to hit assign, which is, I hope you guys can see that okay. There's a little drop-down menu and it says assign here. Now, when I click assign, all of my cards are going to pop up and you can see I have mine divided up into different categories. So I'm going to give Tracy an articulation deck, which I've selected, and you can pick as many as you want. So I gave Tracy that free apple tree articulation, and you can tell because it's checked here. So when Tracy logs on, and I'll get into more detail when we do our student demo, when Tracy logs on, she'll be able to see this assignment. Okay. So another thing that we can do under our student profile boxes is we can look at Tracy's accuracy rates. So we do that by looking at her report. Now this is showing what she has worked on, and it also shows how she did. So let's look at Tracy's report here for example purposes. So you can see that I've assigned Tracy's articulation deck here, and I've actually assigned her a few decks. This green check mark here means that she has completed a certain deck. So she finished her Easter Express articulation deck. Now she's actively working on her sentence scramble, or she paused it halfway through. So for this particular example, let's just see how she did on her Easter Express articulation deck. So this is her report for this particular deck. So you can see her accuracy rate, which Boom kept track of for us. And it actually shows which items she got correct. If she had missed any, which she didn't, good job, Tracy, these little boxes would be red. Now, another cool thing that this does is it actually shows you how quickly Tracy responded to each one of the cards. So it's nice because you can kind of click and you can see if they were just clicking through. You know, if these were all 1 second, you would probably know that they just clicked through and picked random choices. But it looks like she really took her time on a couple of these. So she probably actually did them. Okay, so student sign-in. What we're going to do is I'm actually going to log out of mine and I'm going to log into Tracy's profile. So we're going to go to the Boom homepage and we're going to click Student Sign in with Boom, and we're going to type in a username and password that we are going to give the students. Now, when we create a class and we add a student, it's going to ask us, it's going to prompt us on the screen for the student's name, and Boom will actually generate a unique username for the student. And we are going to give them a password. So this could be something, you know, as simple or as secure as you want it to be. One that I like to use is speech, just because everyone can remember that. And the passwords are what you're going to share, as well as the username, with your actual student, so they're able to log in. So they're going to go to student login and sign in with Boom. Now Tracy's unique username is Tracy-59, so I'm going to sign in under her here and type in her unique password. So this is Tracy's profile. When she logs in, we can scroll down and she can see her assignments. So I'm going to do a quick demo of what it looks like on her end when she clicks on this. As you can see, she clicks on it and it's right there. So this is nice because you could have her do this for homework, like I said, or also, like I said, you could have her log in, or you could help her log in prior to the session that you're going to be working with her during, and it will keep your accuracy rates for you. And there's our screenshot of the Arctic deck and the demo. Now we also have some language decks that we can do. And I have assigned a language deck to Tracy as well, this particular one. That's just an example. And I'm going to do a little demo for you here. So we're going to save and quit and go back to our home page. So Tracy actually has a sentence scramble activity that I assigned her using her profile box. And this is nice because all of these Boom cards you can kind of tailor to what you need to work on with your students. So for Tracy, I want to work on 4-word sentences today. So this is nice because she can actually use her language to tell you which words to put in which box, or you could give remote control access. Like I said, it just depends on the exact needs of the students. So what we would do is either she or myself would drag each of these words into the boxes. The whales are big. And then when we hit submit, we got it correct. So she gets that sound, that immediate feedback, and she knows she got it correct. Now, if she does one incorrectly, it'll tell her which one she missed, and she'll have to rearrange those. So that's just a little demo about the language cards. And like I said, I mean, there are Boom cards for everything that you could probably think of. So here are my links and sources. I included a Boom Learning homepage link there, a link to a blog post that I found that was really helpful about using Boom in teletherapy, and a YouTube video of that as well. And then I included those cheat sheet links to giving remote access using the different platforms as well. And I will open it up to questions. Does anybody have any?
Well, poop. Somebody's mic is unmuted. I don't see that person. So make sure you mute your mics unless you want to speak.
Yes.
So while you all are thinking of questions for Rachel, I'll chime in here for just a second and let you know, as Rachel mentioned, there's a free version and a paid version of Boom Cards. I know that there's been several people who have reached out to me asking, like if we were going to spend our money that we're given on any sort of virtual resource, what would you recommend? And this would be one of those that I recommend. I think it's very, very useful for a variety of types of students on your caseloads. It's not incredibly expensive. The pricing for the paid version is based on you purchase a number of points. I don't know the exact number of points and what it gets you, because the version that Rachel's showing you that we use is a paid account, but we have a company account. So all the therapists in our company have access to Boom Cards. So the way that we do it's a little bit different, but it is not incredibly expensive. So if there is a resource that you're looking for, this is a good one.
We do have one question from Chris Nichols. How can we get our kids with iPads to be able to control the cards?
Yeah, so if you give remote control access to your student who is using an iPad, they will be prompted to allow the remote control access on their iPad. If they do that, they're able to control some features of the Boom Cards. I will say that when you give remote access on a tablet, sometimes it's a little bit tricky. And what I have run into, a lot of times my students are able to select or hit the Boom Card feature that they want, but there's difficulty when they have to drag. Where it's a touch screen, it gets a little bit tricky, and it works better if they are on a computer, but it just depends on the deck based on what you can do on an iPad.
You have another question from Mary Cummings. Mary, do you want to unmute your mic? Or do you want to type it in the chat box? That would be fine too. Or did you accidentally raise your hand? That happens as well. Okay. I'm not seeing anything from Mary. Are there any other questions?
All right, well, we'll have another little open question session at the end. So in case anyone thinks of anything at that time.
We just had a question from Linda Seuss. I tried giving control to a student this morning and I was unable to. Any suggestions?
Are you referring to the remote control access?
Linda, if you want to unmute your mic.
So hey Rachel, I'll take this one because I've been playing around with this on multiple platforms. So I do know I do know in Zoom and I believe Google Meets that you can give remote access. In Teams, I'm still trying to figure out how to do it. I have not figured out how to give remote access in Teams. If I figure that out, I'll let you guys know.
Thank you, because that's the only thing that we're allowed to use at this time.
I understand that, but Teams as a platform right now, I don't think has the capability for any sort of remote access. So it would have to be just kind of a look only or, a teach only model.
And that is one of the things. That is one of the things I turned into the Microsoft development team. Being able to access Boom Cards was specifically mentioned.
Yeah, or any app that has some sort of an interactive component to it. So I'm sure, Leanne, that'll capture your question. Will capture not only Boom Cards but any app that would have that
interaction. Yeah, it did.
Yep.
We have another question from Danya Warren. Do you want to unmute your mic? I think you're trying to speak, but I'm not hearing you. Danya, if you want to, there you go.
Yes. Here we go. Okay. Working. Okay. I just wanted to say that on Teams, you can give remote control access, but instead of like on Zoom, how you can just give it, the person on the receiving end has to request permission. Then you can give it. It's kind of odd. Does that make sense?
Go ahead, Rhea.
Danya, thank you for that feedback. I think this is kind of on my plate right now to kind of navigate some of these things, and I'm going to try and post them in the telepracticing teams group. So I appreciate that feedback, and I'm going to work on that.
But I will say the caveat is that I'm not sure if it works on, I've noticed that different devices, like for instance, between the therapist in the room, it will work if we're practicing and they request remote control access and I give it on Teams, they can do it. But on some other platforms, like maybe a telephone, or I'm not even sure about the Chromebooks, I don't know if that, I haven't seen that ability on there. So it might be device specific, and that's what I'm not sure of. Just an FYI.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay.
And that's actually on our to-do list, some technical issues to address with Teams specifically. So Leanne and Libby and I will work together on that as well, because a lot of that goes back through Mark Moore at the Department of Ed. So, okie doke. I think Tracy, if you're ready, we're going to move on to Story Champs, and then we'll have time for some questions also at the end, if you think of anything else.
All right.
Take it away.
I'm going to go ahead.
Thanks.
I've got a delay with my sharing of the PowerPoint, so.
Oh, that's okay.
Bear with me just a second.
That's okay. I was just going to say thank you, Rachel. I had fun being a student in Boom last night. So it is a very
I'm
helpful.
glad you enjoyed it.
Yes, yes. It was great. So it is very helpful. So thank you. Okay. Sally's got it up here for us.
Oh, okay, perfect.
All right. So as we've said, I'm Tracy Toman, and I'm a speech language pathologist and a visiting service instructor with West Virginia University. And I'm also a member of Integrated Speech Solutions. So I've got my hands in a little bit of everything. So today I'm going to talk to you about Story Champs. And we briefly talked about it in the spring last year, which was a crazy time for all of us. So I'm very, very happy to be asked to be back here again to give you some more information. So we'll try to get a little more in depth today, and I'm here to answer as many questions as I can for you all. So I'm very happy to be back. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Thank you, Sally. Is it working? Okay, there we go. Perfect. So what is Story Champs? So Story Champs is a narrative language intervention that was developed by Language Dynamics Group. It is a multi-tiered intervention that's tied to curriculum to help facilitate academic language for students, and it uses explicit teaching. So it was intended for preschool through 3rd grade. However, I've used it with some of my older students who read on a lower reading level. We'll go to the next slide and we'll talk a little bit more about your types of kids that you can use the Story Champs with. So it's really great for a lot of your typical language kids and really a lot of your kids on your caseload. So your students who come in who struggle to tell you what they did over the weekend, your students who struggle to put together a sentence. Story Champs targets those language skills, semantics, syntax. There's elements of pragmatics and executive functioning. So this curriculum was built upon the idea that students acquire multiple language skills simultaneously through story retells. And we all know that understanding stories and being able to tell or create a story is a huge part of their academic work in English language arts and throughout elementary school. So this program kind of encompasses all of that. And I've also been able to use it for our TIC when you have those kids at sentence and conversation level who still need some structure. It's been great to use for them too. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so what do I need in order to use Story Champs? So as you know, there is a digital version, which in a lot of the kits that I believe you all have kits, or most of you have kits on site. So in some of the kits, they come with a flash drive. Now I know that the first kit that came out didn't automatically have the flash drive, but the second edition did. So if you don't have the flash drive, a dock cam can be used that is very helpful to do similar things. So you're going to need internet access for your telepractice and the ability to share a screen, which has been discussed. And another thing that I recommend with Story Champs that isn't part of the kit, the digital version or the physical kit, is there's a free download, and the website's here, you can have access to it. The free download is for the Cube Dynamic Assessment. Oh, I lost my screen here. Just a second. How do I get that pull back up here? Is there a way to pin you just your screen, Sally? I've lost it. Can everybody else still see the slideshow?
No,
No.
it's gone.
No.
Okay. All right. Let me just go ahead and see if I can pull it up here. Okay. Okay. Maybe. Or can we have...
Tracy, do you want me to see if I can share it?
Yeah, I was going to say if Mary can turn off her video, maybe we might be able to get Rachel if you try to share it again. Sorry, guys. I'm having some problems on my end here. Oh, thank you. Perfect.
Working? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me scroll back for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be on slide 27 there. Yes. All right. So the Cube Dynamic Assessment, we'll get into a little bit later, but that link is live. So this next slide here, we're going to talk about the different levels of Story Champs. So it contains levels A through J, which have increasing language complexity and linguistic targets. So each story follows a basic story structure, which also increases with complexity as you advance through the levels. So they keep adding these story grammar elements, as they call it. So you'll see in the basic story structure, you have your character, problem, feeling, action, and ending. And as you advance to level B, to the enhanced structure, they add in setting and an ending feeling. And when you get to enhanced plus in C through I, that's when you start adding in your causal connections, your temporal concepts before and after, your modifiers, your adjectives, adverbs, all of those things, in addition to the story grammar elements of plan and action and consequence that are all together. So as that's building, you'll have a lesson on causal connections and teaching kids about because and so that, which I often tie to emotions, and it's very helpful for our students on the spectrum and tying in some of your pragmatics of understanding why things happen, why they feel that way. So those stories come in C through I, and as they build and progress, you might have one lesson on causal connections, and the next lesson is on temporal concepts, and the next one is on your modifiers, but then they'll start combining them together. So the kids are learning through these story retells how to keep creating a more and more complex story with all of these linguistic targets that we would be hoping for. And then by the time you get to that level J, the advanced story structure, it becomes very complex with a plan and your action and a consequence where you have the same problem that they weren't able to solve, and then a second feeling, which is a result of failure of their first plan. So a new plan, a new action, another consequence. So it just keeps building on itself. Also within these levels, there's vocabulary stories, they're blitz stories, and these use context clues to teach vocabulary. So as you know, vocabulary is extensive, and we have tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3. So it's so hard to tackle. How do we tackle vocabulary for these kids? It's nice that this model gives us a way to teach context clues, so that when they're in social studies and they don't know that vocabulary word that will be on their vocab test for social studies, how do they use context clues to figure out the meaning of that within that sentence? So the idea is then that these stories obtain all of these language skills through story retells and eventually their own creations. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Rachel. Thank you. Sally's internet went out, I found out. That's what happened. Sorry. So this is an example of what your Story Champ screen would look like for a level A basic story. And this is actually the first story of Story Champs, which I have done many times. So I'll give you a brief, not verbatim example, but probably pretty close. So you would start with your maximum visual cues with picture cards and icons that represent each of those basic story structure or story grammar elements. So you see at the bottom, you have your character, your problem, your feeling, your action, and your ending. So I would tell this story to the student that Johnny was riding his bike down the street to go to his friend's house. Johnny accidentally crashed into a rock. Oh, Johnny was sad because he cut his knee and it hurt. So Johnny ran home to ask his mom for a Band-Aid. After, and there's one of those temporal concepts, after Johnny got his Band-Aid, his knee felt better and he rode his bike again. So we would give them that story, and then the child could retell the story with the pictures and the icons. Then we're going to start fading out your visual cues. So even on the side at the bottom, you can see icons only. Or if you were doing it with the in-person kit, you would have the picture cards for the story, and then you would just place out the icons that are little icon cards, or you could use the popsicle sticks for those, so that they still have the visual representation of what that story grammar element is, but they no longer have the picture card to say, oh yeah, it was a bike. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So you can see this would be the icons only, and there is a 2-prompt system with Story Champs. So you would ask the kid, who is this story about? And the student answers incorrectly or doesn't know the character at all. So you would immediately correct and say, Johnny, then ask again for that correct response. So who is the story about? Johnny. If they still don't know, you say, tell me Johnny, and then they give you the right answer, so that there's not a lot of extra questions. Well, come on, think about it. You're giving that explicit instruction. That's a very key part of this particular intervention. So they're using this 2-prompt system. They tell the story with the icons, and then you take away all the visual cues and they tell the story again. As they start to master these levels, there are also story starter cards that come in the virtual kit and your physical kit. And these allow them to create their own stories with these icons for each level. You can also print the icons or send them home. You can tie them to stories they're actually using in their classroom. You can get the teacher buy-in for that. They love it because it helps all the kids in their classroom. I have several kindergarten teachers who have been floored with this and love it. Or you can send it home and have them reading books with their parents at home, and you're getting that carryover and generalization of, oh, every story I read everywhere has a character and there's a structure to that. So when I'm telling my story about the weekend, I can have a structure to what I did. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. But you can also use these stories as an opportunity to target those WH questions, which is a goal that many of us use. So it can sometimes be a little broad with just WH questions. And instead of always saying, well, who puts out a fire? A fireman. Though very relevant and something important for them to know, we can also now tie it into academic work with who crashed their bike? Johnny. So there's a character, that's who, and it reinforces those concepts of the WH questions through these elements of the story. So on this page, we're talking a little bit about that free download that I mentioned previously, the Cube Dynamic Assessment. So this screenshot is the narrative language measures, and it is free. It does not come with the Story Champs kit, the physical or the digital version, but you can download it from that Language Dynamics website. And with this kit, it has stories that are built on the same framework as Story Champs. So if you're doing a kindergarten level story that has just character and problem, feeling, the plan or the action and the ending, you can score for those things and take that out because your kid's not ready for these other levels yet. That's fine. However, what I like to use these stories for, because they're on the same framework, is I use them for my progress monitoring. They're organized by grade level. They look at their sequencing ability, their vocabulary use, if they maintain that basic story structure in their retell. It has the comprehension questions. Who was the story about? Where were they at the beginning of the story? Why were they sad? And it also has 3 assessments or 4 per season, which is how they have it framed. But I use them per grading period because we have 9 weeks. So for progress monitoring, it's easy for me to do one of these. It has no visual cues. The top of it is just the story that you read to the student and say, thank you for listening. Now I want you to tell me that story. And while they're retelling it, you can score it and see exactly baseline where they're at before you even start using Story Champs, and check in 3 weeks later and see, okay, now they really understand feeling, but they're still having difficulty with character. So I know I'm going to hit that hard, and I might have to re-explain character is who the story's about in some of my sessions coming up before I do this again as another progress monitoring point to see, okay, they've got all of these. Maybe now they're ready for level B stories. Or let's go ahead and move to C through I because they've got these. They're now ready for more episodes within the story. They need a plan and an action, not just the action. So I think this is a really great free resource to kind of help keep your data in line and also help you figure out where they're generalizing these things and where they still need a little bit more help with the Story Champs. So we can go ahead and go to our next slide here. So here are all of the resources for kind of what we've been talking about. I know I talk very quickly, but the Language Dynamics group has your link for buying Story Champs if you don't have it. It's also on sale right now. There's a discount code until the end of the month. So if you check that out, it is on sale. I think it's like 15% off or something. There's also a free webinar on the 30th for Story Champs. They do a lot of these free webinars. You can sign up with a free account through your email. It's fantastic. I get emails for webinars about the narrative language measures from that Cube Dynamic Assessment, or when they're doing another Story Champs webinar. And some of them are about the theoretical and research information behind it, and some of them are straight up, here's a training video of how a session would go. So it's a great website with a lot of resources to help you kind of get through each level. This is not to say that, Story Champs is the be-all, end-all of your narrative language interventions. I know I mentioned in the spring that the skill program is also great. I just happen to have more experience with this digital version of Story Champs and have found that it's very user-friendly, and in person with the kit, it's also friendly, and the the stickers when they're writing their own story, and they can draw a stick figure if they want of their character and things, has been very helpful for a lot of my kids to organize their thoughts and story structure. So it is pretty user-friendly. Like Rachel, I'm also not getting paid by Story Champs or Boom. we're just here, part of Integrated, coming to help. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I hope that's a little more in depth with some of the example of how a lesson might go. Any questions?
While you all are thinking of questions, hey, Rachel, will you share that PowerPoint again, please?
Sure.
While you all are thinking of questions, as usual with our telepracticing series, Leanne and Libby will post this training on the telepractice resource group, so you can access it after today if you have a friend or someone who didn't get a chance to access it today. Our contact info for presenters is on the PowerPoint slide that Rachel's going to share. So if you have any questions about the resources that we shared today, you can feel free to email us or tag us in Teams using the @ before our name. So you can ask a question in there. If you ask a question that way, everyone in the group can see it. So it could be a question someone else had as well. So it's a good way to, maybe answer the same question someone else had. Rachel, if you go to the next slide.
Sure. And you do have a question about how long are the Story Champs trainings?
So they vary in length depending on what exactly it is they're talking about. Most of them are anywhere from 45 minutes to about an hour. But they do have links as well to the YouTube videos that have like some examples of sessions, and those are maybe 15 minutes.
Okay. Our next, if you want to mark your calendar, our next telepracticing series is October 30th.
All right, I'm done.
So roughly 11 to 12. And then for OTs and PTs, it's at 1 o'clock. And then there's a QR session or a QR code for today's session. And then Libby is also posting the link to that form. And if I also put the link in the PowerPoint for those who access it after the fact, if it's pertinent to them after the live training. All right, back to any questions.
Looks like there's a comment from Chris Nichols, who've used it. It's good information. Do you want to comment, Chris, or do you want us to read it? They need most is technical training, like how to navigate these programs on Teams. And we agree, we understand, and that's why we've reached out to the Microsoft development team at their headquarters. So hopefully we'll get some information. And Ria is working on it as well, and her team. So I think we will be getting you some information.
Yep.
And oh my goodness, thank you all so much for this information. I've learned so much. It was good to actually see how you navigate those different programs. That was very helpful. Other questions, folks? I've posted the Scantron, or the information on the link on where you would go to get a certificate sent. You would only do that if you attended this live. We can't give you certificates otherwise, but please, if you want a certificate, go to that link or use the QR code. And there's just 2 questions. We just need to know the name you want on the certificate and the email address that you need to send it to. Please make sure you use the correct email address, because I basically copy and paste. And so if it's incorrect, then unfortunately, I won't be able to get your certificate to you. So Mary says she cannot access it. Okay. Oh, Mary, your camera's on. So is anybody else having trouble accessing it?
I actually just did it, but when it said, where do you want it sent, I just put my school and sent it, and now I can't download it again.
Okay, thank you. I'll keep a note of that.
Okay,
I appreciate
sorry.
it. I'm glad to know you were able to access it.
Okay, yeah, if I can, yeah, if you can just still somehow get it to me, thanks.
I will get it to you.
Thank you.
Anybody else having trouble? Mary said she could not access it. The QR code works. That's nice to know, Jennifer. Thank you. Vicki, you would go to the link that's in the chat. Good, Mary. Thank you. You would go to the link that's in the chat, and you copy that whole link, and then you paste it in your browser. And if you have problems, just email me or something, and I'll help you. And when we start getting the ASHA CEUs, then there will be extra questions, because ASHA requires, you to prove that you've attended it by answering some basic questions. So this is a good habit to get into, to get used to. Every time you attend a live session, there will be a link like this, and with a survey. And in order to get the credit, you would need to complete the survey. Good, Chris. I'm glad you got it. Any other questions? Oh my goodness, this was wonderful. Thank you. And we had a heck of a time getting integrated solutions back onto our team. Thank goodness it finally worked. And because we don't know what we would do without you guys. You're just wonderful, and we appreciate you so much.
Well, thank you. We're back. So tag us.
Yay! And you know what I think Leanne found out is that I tried to re-enter your names too soon. It had to like filter through some sort of thing. So
it's actually my fault. It's a long technical story, but it's my fault. But it's all
it's all working, and I'm loving it. So thank you all. We will see you on, when is the